And welcome back, Fourth and Long fans. It's your footy correspondent, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another off-season supporter series. And as you can see in the YouTube video, those that are watching it, I have a very special situation here. I have two supporters of the same team hopped on the podcast, and that is because you'll kind of give away what club it is by the podcast. So I will stop right there and just introduce them personally. We have Tim and Simo. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today.
No worries. Thanks, Donnie. Thanks for having us. Good to see you again.
Pleasure, mate. Thank you. Thanks for having us on.
Yep, I had the extreme pleasure of hopping on these gentlemen's podcast earlier this year. Absolutely enjoyed it. We will save the name for that in just the tiniest bit. It'll kind of be give it away, so we will save a little bit of that for that. So I always like finding out a little bit about the person that I'm talking with or people that I'm talking with in this particular episode. So tell me just a little bit about your guys' selves outside of the game of football.
All right. Well, I suppose Tim, 33, turning on 34. Got a 2-year-old daughter named Harper who was born in 2021, which was a really good year for our club. Outside of footy, so I'm a teacher, primary school teacher, teach grade 2, love basketball, love hanging out with the family, live out in the Yarra Valley, which is like wine region. So enjoy relaxing out here with the family, and it's probably not too much there. Hopefully that's enough for you, Donnie.
Not for me.
Short and simple.
My turn. I suppose Simon, or Simo, as I'm labelled on here. 28. I'm also a teacher, PE teacher. Huge Melbourne fan, obviously. Back from for my whole life. Play footy myself. Out in the Yarra Valley as well. Love my basketball. Love all kinds of sports, as you can tell, based on my occupation. Spending time with friends and family. Have a little dog named Louie, who's 8. That's pretty much it from my end, I suppose, as well.
Not a problem, gentlemen. It's a little bit of everything here. So let's jump right into it. We are on a footy podcast, so we gotta talk footy. I love asking this question because you get a lot of different answers. Simo, let's start with you. What is your favorite thing about football?
Oh, I suppose the joy it can bring, I reckon, just like the success around it, but then just the joy playing it. Or it's fun watching it, but also playing it. I think that's the biggest thing. There's never a dull moment in a game of footy, really. You see lulls in other sports, but yeah, there's always something going on with footy. So it's probably my favorite thing about footy.
For me, I think being brought up with it, it's got a really strong family ties to me. And I think just the tradition of going to the football, growing up, going with like my dad and his dad as well too, when I started going, and then sort of now so going with like me and my dad and brother go to the football a lot. Sort of it is like a real family sort of thing for me. And then now starting to try and coerce my 2-year-old, into the colors and sort of getting her ingrained into the game. So for me, I think that's probably my favorite thing about it's been a really strong family bond thing for me. So like, yes, there's the joys and there's been a lot of ups and downs with following the club, but it's a really, really special thing that I can sort of share with my family and something that we try and always make time for. The years can get really busy, but we always try and make time to spend time together at the game and have that to bond with as well.
Awesome, awesome. We'll jump into it. I'm gonna make you think a little bit. Let's go back into the memory valves here. Can you remember your earliest footballing memory? We'll start with Tim.
Yeah, I do. I was thinking about this the other day and was actually talking to my dad about it. The first game I went to, I just turned 5. It was Melbourne versus Carlton, and I don't remember exactly what round it was. It was early in the season. It might have been around 6 or 7, but I just remember sitting up at the very top of the old stand at the MCG before they pulled it down, and it was one of those ones where at the very top of the old stand where there was, I remember the urinal. You'd go into the urinal at the very top, like you go on all the flights of stairs, you go into the urinal, and it would have this tiny little window that you could actually, when you're taking a piss, you could look out and still and see the ground from there. So yeah, that's probably my first footy memory is going to that game. We didn't win, but I remember enjoying it and going with my cousins and stuff as well too. So again, sort of brings that family thing back into it. But
So
I suppose for me, I was probably a late starter to actually, getting real stuck into footy. I didn't start footy until under 10s. I also didn't go to my first footy game until 2004. It was a game against Hawthorn where we actually got belted, which was a bit upsetting. But yeah, I remember the days of, David Neitz was probably my, that real one that really took the eye, and Russell Robertson, etc. Were those that really, caught the eye there. But then I'd probably have to say probably Auskick and, playing footy in school and things, and just having mates that just, I just wanted to join them as well. But probably basketball was one that took the lead before that.
Oh, you might need to tell Donnie what Auskick is, Tim.
I know what Oz.
Oh,
Oh, you know.
I'm aware. I'm aware enough. I've got a
Yeah.
little bit more knowledge than the common day. Some Americans, but yeah, Ozkick is kind of the prior step for early free footy. We have a couple of programs over here. Surprisingly, the DC Eagles actually have an Ozkick program over here, and they're
Yeah, cool.
trying to slowly develop the sport, at least in DC, through the young ages. So I'm aware of enough Ozkick to know exactly what you were talking about. So Simo kind of already said it, gentlemen. What is the club that you support?
Well, I suppose I'll leap here. Well, obviously it's the mighty Melbourne Demons. A club that, has definitely had its ups and downs in my lifetime. It's been as we like to say, a roller coaster ride. But obviously 2021 was something pretty special, and I think it'd be pretty awesome to see one in the flesh now. Considering the list we have, I think we've definitely got the cattle to do it.
Awesome, awesome. And then actually to both of you, I almost forgot about this. How did you come to support the Demons? For some people, I always find it fascinating how people do it. Is it a family thing? Is it just a luck thing? How did you come to support the Melbourne Demons?
I was actually a really interesting one because my mum tried to rope me into being a Bulldog supporter, and then I really loved kangaroos as a kid as well. But I suppose, I think my dad and my older sister were always like, oh yeah, D's. And then I think one day I finally just said, who should I support? And they said, well, who do you think? It should be Melbourne. So yeah, it's a bit of different flavor in my family. There's Essendon, there's Bulldogs, there's Melbourne. So there's a bit to choose from, but yeah, I wanted to follow the old man. I suppose it's just one of those ones, and yeah, got to go to the games and stuff from probably from 11-ish onwards. Was in the cheer squad and stuff, which is pretty cool. And yeah, got to fly those little floggers, those big
Mhm.
pom pom looking things which you see. But yeah, that was pretty cool.
Tim?
Yeah, it's a family thing for me. Don't think I really had a choice. I think it's been that way. So dad's side of the family, all Melbourne supporters. Actually, dad's dad was a Hawthorn supporter. My papa, but still ended up going to a lot of Melbourne games. So funnily enough, I didn't realise he was a Hawthorn supporter until probably not too long ago, actually. So I'd always sort of envisioned that we'd go to Melbourne games to watch it because I think my papa's best friend was a Melbourne supporter. So we'd go to a lot of games together. But yeah, always a family thing and something that I've now haven't really given Harper much choice of, donned, Demons gear and signed her up. This is, year 2 of being baby Demon member. So it's, for me, that's the choice I got. So that's what she's getting, because I guess that's something that I want to continue that tradition on, and go to games with her and have her bringing up in the game, and hopefully she stays loyal to the D's when she can make her own mind up.
That's fantastic. Absolutely love it. And I love that the fact that you have the family members that kind of they lean on you a little bit, because I've heard the stories. How accurate do you think the stories are of the family ones where they kind of give you the ultimatum? I mean, they're not really meaning that they'll kick you out of the family, but have you heard some of these stories? I've heard some of these great stories of you need to be this supporter or you're out of the family. Have you heard any of those? Because these sound mental to me.
Yeah, I've got a close friend who they're a full Collingwood family. It's pretty daunting going into that family when you're trying to give shit about Collingwood. Yeah, I don't think neither of them had a choice. They bleed Collingwood, and it's a little bit daunting when they're all together and you're either watching a Collingwood game, they're bloody nuts, and I just want to shake my head, to be honest. When you walk through the house, there's posters off in the rooms and stuff, but yeah, I reckon they had to go through a pretty daunting process of choosing a footy team.
But it's pretty
if they had a choice.
interesting. Tim, have you heard of anything like this? Because
Not
I
nah.
legitimately have heard some people say like the dad said you go for this team or you're out of the family.
No, I can't say I have. Like, I got plenty of people that have sort of like similar, like split families in terms of, you know, different teams within that family. And I think immediately, given my daughter's age at the moment, I'm watching a lot of Bluey. There's like a great Bluey episode that more documents the NRL about the state of origin and having the mum go for New South Wales and the others are all going for Queensland, which is quite funny in itself. So, but I haven't heard any sort of real ultimatums about yeah, dividing families for good or anything like that. It's as much as my father-in-law, he's big Richmond. You know, he tried his hardest to get Harper to be a Richmond supporter, but my wife Penny, she's not really, like, she's a token Richmond supporter, but she doesn't really like or care about footy, so there wasn't really much sway on that sense.
Yeah, I can understand it. And Sim, I'll ask you this because I've also heard this one. How is the banter amongst the family when you're when you have different members of your family with different clubs? How's the banter? Because I imagine it's probably fantastic.
Well, I'll probably put my fiance under the wing here. She has been a Carlton supporter. Anytime we've played, I mean, in my time being with her, we're 5-0. Oh, maybe 6-0, sorry. Haven't lost to them yet. And there was one time in the preseason last year where they knocked us off, and I didn't hear the end of it until we played them. And then Cozzy kicked the goal with 20 seconds left. I got concussed in a game of footy. I was meant to go to the game, and I jumped up, started smacking the bench. I think I might have almost broken it. There's a bit of there's a love hate for Carlton, really, for me. Yeah, when we're not anywhere near him, I like to see him do well. But then the banter for my partner about Carlton, it's pretty funny. Considering they've been a basket case for almost 30 years. But they're similar to us. I mean, their time will come, I reckon, in the next couple of years. But yeah, definitely the banter around any footy club. I mean, I hate Hawthorn to a passion. Best mate goes for them. Obviously the Collingwood story, as I told you before. So, those three clubs are a bit of fun when you talk about them. And yeah, I mean, I think that's just a part of footy, which is footy banter, which is pretty fun.
Yeah, and I get it all the time on Twitter. I have mates in almost all the clubs, and the banter sometimes between us during the weeks, like when we play each other, is absolutely fantastic. So, we'll go back in the past a little bit. Can you remember the first Melbourne Demons item you either bought or were given, Tim?
Oh, well, there was definitely like the jumpers that I had were hand-me-downs from, I think, my dad when he was young. So they're like the woolen ones with the collars. But I think the biggest thing that sticks out in mind, and I'm hoping it's around at mum and dad's somewhere still, because there's this ugly plush demon with like little horns that would have been, it'd have to be somewhere circa around like the 1980s, around like when it came out. But it was this pretty ugly looking thing. But I remember having that in my bedroom. I don't know where it came from. It definitely wasn't bought brand new, but that's one of those things that sticks out, as well as a cool hat, which I wish I found as well too, that I had signed for from Gary Lyon and Todd Viney in primary school years. They came and visited our school. But I'm seeing now that, footy vintage stuff. I don't know if you're seeing it as well too on Twitter or anything like that, but vintage footy wear is crazy at the moment in terms of like how much it's being sold for. Not that I want to sell it, but there's just some sweet designs from that sort of era as well too that I wish I'd still had or kept. So, but no, I think the biggest thing was that plush doll. It's got to be the first thing I can remember.
Awesome. Simo?
I'd have to probably say one of those. I mean, I don't know if you remember these, Tim, but the Kmart, just the AFL brand jersey. The Kmart, just a AFL
still got it.
badge.
I still wear it.
You do still wear it, actually.
I do still wear it. It still fits me. I think it would have been 10 sizes too big when I bought it.
Oh, crazy! Yeah, that's probably the first item I owned. I remember. I think Russell Robson was at Churnside Shopping Centre, out Yarra Valley way, eastern suburbs, and he was doing a hat signing, and I actually still have the hat now, but the signature's a bit faded. But I think I might have got that in a show bag when I was about 5. So that's probably those two. I think when I was quite young, and then another Demon big toy, it's probably about 30 centimeters long, and put white out with Russell Robertson's number on it. That's probably the other one as well.
Awesome, awesome. And I'm pretty sure I know this answer just because, I mean, you two gentlemen have a podcast about your club, but I love hearing people describe how they fan, because everybody fans differently. Nobody fans exactly the same. So I asked this, Simo, we'll start with you. Can you describe your fandom of the Melbourne Demons for me?
As in how I feel about them, or
How great, how diehard you are. Do you live and die
oh,
by it? It's like, how do you fan? Are you one of those, as you kind of said, will you break something if the team does well? Do you go absolutely nuts when they win? How's your kind of day to day when it comes to being a fan of the Melbourne Demons?
it'd actually be really interesting to hear each other's thoughts about how each other or how we are. I think Tim saw it in the flesh when we beat Brisbane in the last game of last year, which was pretty interesting at home. Just the pre-game stuff and the during game stuff was pretty interesting. But yeah, no, I think ever since I really took a huge liking to footy and then actually got a taste of going to games, I think it just everything I sort of live and breathe the D's, I guess. Well, especially when it's footy season. I mean, keep track of things in the off season, but it's one of those things. If the D's are on and people trying to get my attention, and good luck. I'm very fixated with what's going on. It's just one of those things where it's a big part of my life. I mean, I get to chat about it with Tim, which is pretty awesome. Basically, I mean, I've got heaps of merch and stuff. I mean, there's a reason for it. Love wearing the attire. It's good colours, by the way. Just live and breathe the D's, and just hope to see one in the flesh, which would be awesome.
Awesome, Tim.
How would you describe it? I suppose it's probably definitely changed over the course of the journey. I think probably the last 10 years really sort of getting involved and really probably more passionate about it, even through some of the shit times that we go. And I was making the extra effort to make sure I was watching every game, at least if I couldn't get to it, and getting quite annoyed, and sort of my family didn't want to be anywhere near me when I was watching the game. But I reckon the last few years have been a little bit more reserved in watching, a little bit more calm, and I think that's probably a credit to how the team sort of played and performed. But sort of similar to Sim, for me, it's been something, especially the last couple of years, something to really kind of latch onto. You sort of get a real love for the club, and just, I suppose, the journey, and I guess the romance about the journey, about where our specific club's being like the oldest club in the competition, and the tradition and that sort of thing. But for me also, it also would set up the weekend, and it would really kind of dictate the mood that the weekend would start on, whether you won or lost. And I'll never forget, my wife said, and this was during lockdown, one of the whichever year it was, but watching the game, she goes, "I wish I could make you as happy as well as you are when the D's win." So that probably sums it up there. I've certainly spent enough cash on merchandise and memberships and stuff, but it's it's just a pure enjoyment thing. Like, I wouldn't say like a diehard is like, I wouldn't go to every game. I think just family life and context and stuff, it's too hard for that. But certainly making the effort to watch every game, and it's been, the podcast has been a great avenue to chat about it and make new connections, and probably like yourself, being able to chat with, like, having the privilege to chat to some figures from the club and journalists and stuff, and really kind of get a little bit more involved. I think that just makes you appreciate it even more as well. So it's such a fantastic game, and you really kind of you embrace it all, the game day experiences to the stuff off season, and just something to look forward to every weekend. I mean, we'd almost say it's the bye, or when we weren't playing the finals, it's probably a little bit kind of nice because the stress wasn't there, but also, you wish your team was in it at the same time. So it's Yeah, long-winded answer.
I 100% agree with all of it. Again, nobody is perfect. Nobody is the perfect fan. I think it's impossible. Everybody fans differently, but it is very interesting. And again, you have that outlet, you have that podcast. It's the reason why I do my AFL round reviews and then the AFLW as well, because it lets me talk footy. It lets me get a chance to it because again, I don't have footy clubs within 8 kilometers of my house. I don't. I have my club, but my club really doesn't have club rooms or a stadium or anything. It's an entity. That's it. So this is for me, this is my great outlet to be able to do it. So I love hearing everybody's different reactions to it. Let's stay back in the past a little bit. Can you remember the first D's game that you attended?
Yeah, well, I said this one before, but against Hawthorn, 2004, believe, yeah, both of us weren't great at the time, but yeah, we had an absolute stinker of a day and yeah, got done. But I tell you what, the difference between the MCG then and now is pretty gobsmacking, to be honest, considering that was almost 20 years ago, or 19 to be exact. But yeah, I just love the feel of being at the G.
And yeah, like I was mentioning before, as part of my first footy memory, was that game against Carlton. I think it would have been around about 94. But
Great year
the
that
other
one,
other,
Tim.
sorry,
That's a great year, that one.
94.
Yeah.
Yeah. um, that's when Simo was born for the other people who didn't quite catch on there. The only other game that really kind of sticks in my mind that I really remember is I think it was 97. It was David Schwartz's first game back after some pretty some pretty bad debilitating knee injuries. So that was really, I remember Dad sort of talking about him. I'd never seen him play, but going to watch him versus Adelaide. I think it was 1997. We didn't win. I think it was relatively close, but yeah, again, he's the sort of player that was one of those crystal ball moments that, what could have been without those injuries as well too.
All right. So my next question, this is always fun because this is like choosing your favorite child if you have multiple kids as a parent. Favorite player of the past and favorite player currently on the D's list.
I'll start off here. Now I've always been one to like a bit of flash, which will come within the name. One of my favorites has to be my favorite player of the past. Has to be Aaron Davey. Just the way he moved. His sidestep was killer. I remember the goal he kicked against Freo when we come back from like 50 down at halftime. About 3 different balks. And then finished from about 50. That was incredible. Another one where he kicked it off the ground from a Robertson handball against Brisbane up at the Gabba was another one. But yeah, the flash was my definite favourite of the past. I mean, probably would have thought Robertson based on the merch I had early on. But yeah, definitely the number 36, which spans off to the current number 36, which is Cozzy Pickett, which, yeah, I've got a T-shirt of him, but he's a bit of my love child, I think. Just, yeah, but seeing him put size in the off-season, thinking he might have some more midfield time would be pretty cool. Just the way he can impact games. I was watching some highlights of Cyril Rioli, and I was thinking, I mean, if Cozzy can, have that more impact in the midfield and, obviously do what he does forward, like, mate, we've got something special for, I'm hoping another, 10 plus years at least. But yeah, I think just the number 36, which spans off to one of our mates, which we, spoke a couple of times on the podcast, to Andrew Leoncelli, and yeah, his number's definitely bleeding nice and true at the red and the blue.
Favorite of the past. It's a tough one. Simo highlighted it earlier, but I think just the most memorable and probably the most consistent when I was growing up going to games, it had to be David Neitz. I just think that there wasn't a more reliable kick for goal, and we probably haven't had one since. It was almost like the benchmark in terms of I remember him winning the Coleman, the year that we did not do very well at all. But being the captain of the club, he looked like he never aged for 10 years because his hairline stayed the same for so long. But he was just, and I probably grew to appreciate him more. I think, being that little bit older and going back and watching highlights of him and just how consistent he was. And some of his performances that he had earlier on, was just amazing to watch. Jeff Farmer's got to be in there as well too, in terms of like excitement, putting bums on seats and stuff. There's the sort of players that you go to watch. But yeah, I think Dave Nates would probably have to be the favourite one then. And then at the moment, it's hard to go back, Max. I think he's just been, I suppose, such a revelation. And like to sort of come from where he was. And I remember we spoke to Jack Fitzpatrick and talked about when he got drafted and you know, like I suppose how immature he was at the time. And I guess that's probably the bit of the appeal to him as well too, is like you've watched him now become from being a cult figure to now to being such a well-respected player in the competition, not only you know, as a ruckman, which is arguably one of the most difficult positions to play, but then also to lead the club, to be a premiership captain, and then just to back up his performance on the field, like leading all the training standards, like he's out there, you know, doing everything on the field and speaking off the field as well too. I think he's going to go down as probably my favorite, probably my favorite player to play the game for the D's. I mean, there's a few that aren't far behind him, but I think just in terms of his pure ability to play the game and just the respect that he earns around the competition is just pretty amazing.
Awesome. And 100% agree. There isn't a bad one on your list. Honestly, there are many that I would gladly take up at Sydney, to be completely honest with you, but I know that's not going to happen. So I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this next question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Most memorable moment as a D supporter?
You can't really go past the flag, obviously 2021. But probably another one that really, I don't know, this actually reminded me the other day. I was out having a kick with mates and we're playing a game of, I mean, you'd probably be, you know, this Donnie, but you know, the game horse.
Mm-hmm.
You know how you take the trick shot and then other people got to try and copy it. So we're playing that and it was my turn to set the kick. And I've kicked one over my shoulder and it reminded me of when Liam Jarrah kicked one over his shoulder against St Kilda from about 30 out. Check the highlights if you haven't, because that goal was something special. I mean, we didn't win, but I mean, imagine what was he called? The Will Perry Wizard was his nickname for a bit, or the Jarrah-cane. But imagine what Liam Jarrah could have been. I mean, he could have been anything. And you know, another one of those excitement machines. Could probably even think about another moment where he took Mark of the Year against Port Adelaide, where he rode about 3 blokes in a pack. That was nuts. But I hate to leave you guys short. I have to get going. Yeah, definitely that Jarrah-cane moment and the flag as well.
Awesome. Simon, hey, thanks for hopping on, dude. We
Pleasure, my friend.
appreciate it. And hopefully maybe this year we'll have another chat another time, okay?
Sounds good, mate. Take care. See you, Tim.
See you, mate.
Hey, cheers. So Tim, most memorable moment?
So I think aside from the flag, which as good it was incredible, but I guess like just the selfish part of me wishes that, you know, would love to be part of that atmosphere. And I think that aside from that, the qualifying and the semi-finals in 2018 and being able to attend them, so the game against Hawthorn and then against Geelong, Geelong then Hawthorn, I think just being a part of that crowd and getting caught up in the excitement with that and just part of like the celebrations afterwards and being in the bars and whatnot afterwards. I think that was probably my favorite moment as a supporter, being amongst it. It was just, the elation that D's fans had. It was the most excitement that the club had for such a long time. Like there was the old Roosie chants and stuff behind that after, after he'd sort of done his bit to get the club sort of from the bottom and get us pointed in the right direction. So I think as an attending supporter, that's probably one of my favorite moments aside from the premiership, because I think that's a clear one, an easy one, but there's always going to be that kind of bittersweet feeling of not being able to, I suppose, be at the ground or be within a crowd that you're sharing that victory with. But aside from that, though, just quickly on the premiership, I still remember the next day, so the Sunday afterwards, going for a walk, taking my daughter for a walk, just up to a park, and I had we decked ourselves out in D's gear, but there was a numerous people. It was a nice day on the Sunday. Numerous people out there with Demons gear on, and I still remember crossing a road to go to a cafe to get a coffee, and there was somebody stopped at the pedestrian lights, and they had their D's gear on, and they just pumped Grand Old Flag and was just fist pumping as I'm crossing the road, pushing my pram, and it was like I'd sort of forgotten about that for a second, but I was like, that was still like a really fun moment to be in those shitty times where people were, we were just doing what we could to get outside and celebrate. But yeah, that was also really special too.
A memorable moment can be anything, but again, a flag is hard to do, but those are really cool moments, the ones that you can always remember. So I hopped onto your guys' podcast a little bit earlier in the year, and we were about halfway through the season. I think we were just after the bye. So I'm very interested to see, because we had some nice conversation about it. What were your thoughts on this last year's D's team? Because this was a team that if we go to the bye, there was a lot of confidence in D's land about a potential back-to-backs. And after the bye, what happened?
Oh, it's the $1 million question, isn't it? It's yeah, I guess we got off to such a good start, and but we weren't, and it was clear to everybody that we weren't playing at 100%. So we're sort of able to sort of edge out games without, maybe playing a quarter and a half of really good footy and being able to put teams away, and just do enough to sort of get the win, which is great because you're sort of banking wins. Early wins in a season are so important. It really sets you up for, for the second half of the season and heading to the finals, as opposed to doing it the opposite way. So I think because obviously after the bye, or after those first 10 rounds, we then won, we were 6-8. So we lost more games than what we won. I think part of it is due to probably teams spending that extra time, as what would happen to any premiership winner, to dissect your team and your game style a little bit more. I think we just got found out a little bit and probably playing a little bit too safe. So I know a lot of rumblings towards the end where, we weren't being aggressive enough and we weren't scoring enough. We weren't able to kick a winning score. Yes, our ability to defend was never in question. We've got such a stellar backline. We've got all the personnel down there. But when we really struggled to convert all the hard work that we're doing into the middle and getting plenty of inside 50s, but not being able to sort of capitalize that on the scoreboard, I think that really, played a huge role, because then we were always just relying on the back line to do all the heavy lifting, really. I think they just looked tired. They looked tired towards the end of the season. I think having that premiership run, you do get that little bit less rest in the off season. So, you are back into preseason a bit quicker than what teams are that haven't made it. And again, the injuries weren't, it wasn't really any major injuries that really curbed us. I think Max looked sore. There's probably times where we thought he might have taken a week off, then he didn't. And then by the time we got to the finals, I think we had the 2 blowout wins. We had wins against Brisbane, where you thought we had 2 or 3 lulls, and then we played Brisbane and we smashed them out of the park. And the other game was against Fremantle. So I think it was Fremantle in Melbourne, because we lost to them. I remember that was our first loss. I think it was Fremantle. But they were the sort of ones
to look, to be completely honest with you, because I think Fremantle was the first loss of the 2 before the bye week, because Sydney was.
It was another contender. It was not. It was another. So there was Brisbane, and then there was I can't remember exactly.
The beauty of the AFL app. Let's see if I can pull it up as super quick as I can. But it's just it was a very interesting season, and for me, I remember when we talked, I kept telling everybody, I was like, this is the team that if they stay healthy, if everything goes their way, this is a Melbourne team that has the team. And it was a little bit of, you had injuries with May, you had injuries with Lever, then you had the little bit of the drama there. We won't completely go into that.
Yeah.
Let's see, the Brisbane blowout. Yeah, it was Fremantle, but it was Fremantle at Fremantle. because
Yeah.
the one at the G was the one where Fremantle, because I said in our podcast, I said I was angry because I didn't like that the Dockers beat you guys, because I thought Sydney would get an angry D's team in that game at the MCG the next week. So yeah,
Yeah.
so it was Fremantle. You were correct, but it was actually at Frio.
At Freo, that's right. Because we played them in Melbourne, because I was at that game, the one where they thumped us in the second half. Yeah, so I think and then we played Brisbane in the qualifying final. And no, sorry, we played in the qualifying final. No, we played you.
Semifinal. You played us in the qual. You played Sydney in the
That's right.
qualifying final, and
Yeah.
then played Brisbane in the semifinal.
In the semi-final, and I think that was probably, I remember sitting there in the last quarter of the semi-final with Brisbane, and I think we had a small lead at the time, but you could just tell, like, the body language. I think just the players I think they'd just run out of gas. Yeah, I still think, and it's probably been something with Goody, like, as an outsider looking in, it didn't always seem like we had a plan B.
Mhm.
And when we were going long down the line, like to look up for Jackson or Gawn, or whoever was the tall marking forward at the time, to try and just break it up, but just playing safe. And then teams were able to sort of really, if they were clever ball users and they're able to move the ball quickly, we would get exposed pretty quickly along that as well too. So we never allowed huge scores off turnover, but I think our lack of aggression, also our inability to kick a winning score because we weren't being attacking enough, played a big role towards the end as well too. So yeah, it was disappointing. It certainly took me a good week or so just to kind of even think about it again, because I think I just remember like thinking Brisbane aren't in the top 4 teams of the competition at that moment. But that being said, I don't think anyone was going to beat Geelong on that day, and I was there at that game as well too, and it was I think they just had everyone's number there. But I think there's a lot to learn from that in terms of the club will know kind of the differences between 2021 and 2022, and hopefully be able to sort of bridge some of those gaps that they the shortfallings that they had, and sort of find areas to improve.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, so we'll put that season to bed, and we'll go to the off season, because the D's, it's hard to argue that the D's didn't make an interesting off season out of all of us. So I gotta ask, sir, off season moves. Brody Grundy is in the door. Lockie Hunter is in the door. Are you much more confident going into next year with those 2 additions, or are you a little leery? Because I've heard some D's fans are still a little leery about whether Brody Grundy will be the ruckman that he has been in previous years.
It's going to be the biggest question start of the season. I think it's going to be the biggest question around the competition, watching these 2 ruckmen trying to kind of combine and see how their games will integrate with each other. I think in terms of like for like, in terms of replacing the loss of Luke Jackson, which is no doubt a huge loss, but I think they've done the best that they could in terms of recouping somebody of that similar position and size. And Brody Grundy, yes, he's missed all of last year pretty much with injury. He's been a pretty durable player otherwise, and he is still reasonably young. I think he's 28 or something like that. So, look, I actually managed to duck down to training yesterday, and I had my daughter with me, so I wasn't fully paying attention to everything. But I think they could work. I mean, neither of them are prolific goal kickers. I think that's the biggest thing. Max started well, and then sort of certainly faded towards the back end of the last season in terms of his accuracy. He can't kick it from 30 meters in front, but he's happy to wheel around from 55 and do his long arcing run up and whatnot. So it's just been seeing how they can kind of complement each other, playing forward and back of the ball. Like, we know Gawn can be a beast all over the ground. And Grundy, whether they try and even utilize him as a bit of an extra midfielder as well too, working a little bit on ball as well too. It's going to take a few rounds. People can't expect you're not going to be able to judge that from the first 1 or 2 games, and the critics are going to be out there as soon as the ball drops. It's going to happen as straight away. But I don't think we'll know probably until about round 6 or 7 about what it looks like, and the best combination in terms of the percentages, who plays what for how long. But in terms of replacing the like for like with Jackson, I think they've done the best possible job that they could. I don't think anybody would have thought about it prior to that, but it sounds like Max was doing all the driving in terms of getting him to the club and talking about how exciting it would be for those two, arguably the two best ruckmen in the competition they have been at certain times of their career, to play together. It could be a formidable duo for sure. Yeah, Lockie Hunter is an interesting one. I think he could be a bit of an X factor for the D's, and I think he probably makes his way potentially into the starting 22. Josh Shackey, I don't think does. He sort of replaces Wiedemann with that sort of depth role. But I think the depth of experience that Lockie Hunter has from not only winning a premiership, he's had his off-season issues, his off-field issues, but he's a premiership player. He's only 27, and I still think that forward half connection is something that we've missed so dearly as well too. We weren't able to capitalise on that. Generally doing all the hard work in the middle. We've got that formidable trio, in the centre square, but then that connection between delivering the ball to our forwards and putting it in the right spot. I think Lockie Hunter could be a real asset there, and he could be somebody that certainly maybe slides under the radar in terms of being a big off-field acquisition. So considering that trade happened with about 2 minutes to go for the end of the deadline, it could be, it's a low risk, high reward move. Somebody that might flourish in a new environment, around new people. So yeah, I'm excited to see what he brings, as much as Grundy's going to be really interesting to see how that works as well.
I'm very interested to see, does Goodwin almost use him kind of like the replacement for Hunt on the other wing? Because Ed Langdon will take that far wing, and you don't even have to worry about him. So that's the one thing that you don't have to worry about, is that one wing position is set. It's the other wing position that we'll have to see kind of how they approach that. So I'm one of those that I hate saying the word expectations, because I think it puts this, I expect this to come, and I guess I'm the eternal optimist that I don't want to put expectations, because it's easier to fail an expectation than it is to overachieve it. So kind of, what are your thoughts on next season? Do you have expectations, or are you going to come in kind of open-minded, knowing that there's going to take a little bit of gelling with some new guys stepping into the D's 22?
I think, expectations. I mean, I think it's hard not to go in there and expect that, like, we're in the top four sides in the competition. I don't think there's any argument to that. At our best, we're certainly up there, probably in the top two. And like, Geelong are clearly going to be the benchmark. They're going to be hard to beat. They've been so good for so long, and they finally sort of found the right combination. And using their players in the right way last year. But I certainly think that at our best, we can beat every club. So I'd be disappointed if we probably finished outside the top four this year. Whether that's being too ambitious or not, but I'm thinking the integration of some of the new players, it shouldn't take too much of an impact. The Grundy one's going to be the biggest thing. Hunter, I think, should slot in seamlessly, as you mentioned, like jumping in on that wing, which then kind of frees up, hopefully, now with Salem being back, and he looked in pretty good nick yesterday. That allows Brayshaw, and we sort of saw Brayshaw move back into the middle towards the end of last season, which is really exciting to see him getting back to his sort of like his natural position, which he's been such a Swiss Army knife for us over the last couple of years, being plugged and placed anywhere and doing a stellar job. Half back or in the center or on the wing. So I think, the Grundy thing is going to be probably the biggest question, but I think you need to get off to a good start. I was chatting about before about how well, like, early wins are so important. Banking early wins are so important. We've got a reasonable draw. I think that hopefully that we can, I think when me and Simo had a bit of a chat about what wins, where would you expect to be after sort of round 5 and round 6, I think we play you guys round 3. We play Brisbane in round 2 up at the Gabba. But aside from that, I'd expect to beat the Bulldogs and the Eagles over there and Essendon and Adelaide. I'd expect us to be sort of 4-1 after 5 games, worst case scenario. So I think, I've got high expectations, as should any Demon supporter, I think. We've got the talented list. We're in the right age bracket. Our premiership window is wide open. We need to capitalise on that.
Yeah, I would not disagree with you again. I think the D's a little bit last year. I agree with you. I think they got found out a little bit. This is where we see how good Goodwin is. This is where he has a chance to make his offseason, his adjustments to the game plan and see how he does this offseason. We'll definitely have to see. So we're having a little bit of fun now. I know we've had our offseason. Like I said, you bring in Brody Grundy and Hunter, but I'm going to do something fun. I'm going to install you as the list manager for the Melbourne Demons for one day. You can make one move and bring in one player from any of the 17 other clubs. Who's the one guy you bring to the D's and why?
Oh man, it's hard because like it's exciting. Like Key Ford springs to mind because of, I suppose, the way we weren't able to convert last year. But then you're thinking about it, we've got players that are coming up like Jacob Van Rooyen. There's a lot of hype around him, and Tom McDonald is now back on track and looking really fit. So it's sort of like that worked in 2021. Players to play the game. What am I thinking of? Oh. I think last time I answered a question similar to this, I think I said Harry Mackay. I think just purely, as a strong marking full forward, given I suppose his form, and just like his age group at the moment. Like we've got Bailey Fritsch, who's a fantastic goal snaker as that medium-sized forward. Ben Brown's been a little bit up and down. Tom McDonald, if he gets back to his best, can be that. But I suppose a strong forward target that can kick you, anywhere between 3 and 6 goals week in, week out is probably something that would straighten us up a little bit as well at down forward. So I would say somebody of that ilk. So yeah, I'd say let's go with Harry Mackay. But yeah, it's a tough question. Because I think personally, and maybe I'm being a bit biased here, not too many holes in our list, but I think that would be something that
I'm literally sitting here in the back of my head going, okay. I'm like, no, you don't really need anything there. You don't really need, and I'm like, I'm kind of doing the same thing in the back of my head. I'm like, really, the one position that I would say you're a little bit that it's not as strong as some of your other pots is that full forward, tall forward position. Charlie Curnow, I think, would be a good option. Tommy Hawkins, Buddy Franklin, if you want just a little bit more depth when it comes to distance, when it comes to kind of his ability to move around the field. There's a lot of options, but I agree with you. It's like you have that mid forward in Bailey Fritsch. You have that great pocket. You have the great pocket type of player in Keziah Pickett. You maybe could throw another pocket in like a Jake Ginnivan, a Tommy Papley, a Tyson Stengel that you could throw in that could kind of move up the ground a little bit to kind of give some flexibility. So I agree with you. There's not a lot of holes in the D's. So you could either stabilize something even more, or you could throw it into the 1 week spot that you have. So absolutely not a problem there. So my next question, we've kind of already addressed it a little bit, is the fact that you guys had the grand final that your beloved D's won in 2021 out in Optus Stadium. So for 2 seasons in the GABA in 2020 and 2021, the grand final found its way outside of Victoria for like the first time ever. So I asked this, especially as a Victorian, I asked this question. I was surprised to hear the Melbourne media discuss, surprising, that they didn't mind the idea of the grand final potentially becoming a traveling grand final. I know the MCC contract. Let's suspend reality for just the tiniest bit. What are your thoughts on that? Are you one of those that it must be at the MCG? We must at least keep some kind of tradition in footy, or would you be amenable a little bit to maybe once every 4 years seeing the grand final find its way to Optus, to Adelaide, to the GABA again, maybe even to Sydney?
The selfish part of me is going to say no.
Be selfish. There's
that
not a wrong answer in this situation. It's an opinion question, and I love hearing it.
Yeah, I think just from a sheer tradition side of things, and I know, things change. I completely understand that and get that, but capacity wise, being able to fill the ground like with, 100,000 people, no other stadium can really sort of get close to that. I think just like the whole carnival of footy that happens around that area is just, it's a part of Melbourne, and I guess it has been like that for so long. but I can't see it moving away from there. I can see the arguments for, but I think AFL have also tried to kind of, this whole like gather round in Adelaide is maybe like, if that sort of is something that potentially rotates, if that, like, let's say it's a hit this year, and they decide, oh, we can rotate that each year to a different city, then maybe that's in place. It certainly doesn't replace a grand final in the city, and I suppose the income and the revenue that can create for a community like that. But also it's something to say, like, let's celebrate footy in your city for this particular round there. But no, short answer is no. I'd love to see it stay at the G. It's like the Boxing Day test, like it's a part of Melbourne. We're going to be, really selfish here. It stemmed from the Victorian Football League, and it's expanded out. And I think just being able to house as many people to come together as possible, it should stay at the G.
There's no wrong answer. I just asked because, again, you get different answers. I've been surprised. There have been some Victorians that said they wouldn't mind it if it did happen, but they kind of know, again, the 50-year contract is kind of something that you're just not going to get around. So you kind of also brought up the next one. I got to talk about this, the gather round this year. Again, whether the name is great, I'm still kind of on the fence on that.
I'm not sure,
but South Australia, Adelaide, get to host basically Magic Round ripoff gather round for the AFL. As a Victorian, I gotta ask, what are your thoughts on gather round? Do you plan on going? And do you think this is something that you'd like to see going further? Or are you going to kind of wait to see how the crowds are before we kind of make a thought on whether this should be permanent or not?
Well, first of all, I haven't thought about going yet. What month are we in? We're in
January.
April there. What's that? I think I'm actually away anyway. But look, I don't mind the idea. I hadn't really heard of Magic Round. I know they've sort of borrowed it, stolen it from, is it the NRL?
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, I think you think back to when we had the hubs and we had some of those, we had some of those rounds that would last, or really quick turnarounds. It was kind of like something different, and that that wasn't something by choice. We had to do that in terms of having the game continue on during COVID. But I think I think it's they can only see how it goes, and I don't mind the idea. And I think that if it becomes an annual thing each season, and they do find, let's say, for instance, they rotate it through a couple of different, because I know that, I think New South Wales were vying for it. There's a couple of other towns that sort of wanted to throw their hand up for it. I'd see no reason why it shouldn't go ahead, and it gives it a bit of a different look and something different for the clubs to sort of head to, and a bit of a celebration in one particular area of Australia that's not Victoria. So I'm all for that. Just not the grand final.
Hey, again, it's very interesting. I'm fascinated by it because I have heard some groans when it comes to the fixture. The fixture is not exactly what I would call its strongest. I think there's some teams that I think probably deserve a little bit of a better spot where they're going to play, but we won't address that currently.
It's only one round too. Like, I'm not worried. It's only one round.
Yeah.
It's one game in the home and away season. It's like it is what it is. It doesn't have, I don't think it'll have a long lasting impact on like results, from that. So yeah, look, let them trial it. It's, Gill's still trying to, leave his legacy on and leave his fingerprints on the competition. And yeah, let's see what happens.
Yep, 100% agree. So, and we kind of talked about this off mic. I'll ask the question, and you kind of said it. I'm a huge AFLW supporter. I'm a huge proponent of the women's game. Do you keep an eye on the women's side for the D's, because I mean they just won a flag this last year?
Look, not as much as I'd like to. I certainly keep track of it and follow the scores. I haven't been able to attend any games and stuff, but again, like with a daughter and stuff, it'd certainly be something that I'd want to sort of, continue to to start to bring her to those games as well as men's games as well. Amazing feat by them to win the flag this year in what ended up being a really successful 18 months for the entire club, with the AFL, VFL and AFLW premiership all within that window, which is pretty amazing. But I did manage to watch most of the grand final with that, which was really exciting. As I said, those last couple of minutes were pretty hairy and hard to watch. But yeah, it's yeah. To get to your question, I don't watch as much as I'd love to, just purely time wise. But yeah, it's an amazing feat and something that I hope to make more time for moving forward.
Awesome. You say you don't keep track of it. Do you know any of the players' names? And do you have a favorite?
Um, oh look, I know a few names of the players. Like I suppose where we got is it Paxman?
Darren Paxman. Yep.
Karen Paxman, who's been, I know, like a steady performer for D's for a long time. Obviously, Daisy Pearce has been, the stalwart for the D's and well, pretty much for the face of the AFLW competition, which has been really exciting. Is it Katie Hall?
Kate Hoare. Yep.
Yeah. We got obviously, I say obviously Taylor Harris coming
Yep.
to the D's this year. And having an impact, which is great. Libby Birch. Yeah, I know there's a
Hey,
couple of
you've
others,
got
but
some
yeah.
you've got some of the best ones, but I'll tell you this: when you get a chance to watch them, check out a couple of youngsters. Liza West and Alyssa Bannon are a couple of live
Alyssa Bannon, I
wires
remember,
on your roster that I think are going to be fun to watch over these next few years. Eliza West, a nice, tough, hardy midfielder that I think is great getting the footy, and and Alyssa Bannon is an absolute gun. She is a jet. She is an absolute excitement machine. She is like Kazi Pickett, 8 inches, like 4 inches taller, and able to play in the midfield and to run. I mean, she had one play earlier during this season. She had 6 bounces from the back pocket almost to the forward pocket, but then tried to pass it to Daisy in the goal square. And it got spoiled. So she I was like, Alyssa, go for goal there, girl. Go for goal. But she played the great team play. So a
Yeah.
couple of ones to definitely keep an eye on. And Eden Zanka is another one that I think when you get a chance to look at the women's team, some absolute guns on the D's roster. So we jump from that to some fun questions for me because as I tell many people, I have not been to Australia. It is on my bucket list. I want to get to the SCG. I want to get to the MCG and see games. So I'm asking a couple of questions to get some feedback. So when I go, I'm ready. So I ask this: when you go to the footy, I'm an American. We love our food. What's your go-to food when you go to the footy?
It has to be just pie and chips. Like it has to be, it's the staple. It's been the staple at footy for a long time. Footy pie has always been part of part of the culture. So it has to be that. It's probably the cheapest thing there, given that everything else is pretty expensive and not very good. But a pie, you always know what you're in for. You can't really stuff up a pie because they're pre-made and they're 4 and 20 always do a good job, and that's that's part of footy.
Awesome, awesome. Now this one's my other favorite. When you go to the game, where's your ideal place to sit at the footy?
Generally, so we'll normally go with Dad and my brother. Normally sit on level 2 or level 3 in the MCC. So generally around about on the wing, sometimes towards the forward pocket, depending on where we get the seats. You get a good view of sort of everything. You're not as close to the action as you would be down on level 1 and sort of close to the boundary line, but you do get a good view of sort of everywhere, and it's also very close to the bar behind you. So I think that's always a win as well too.
Fantastic. And I love ending my podcast with this one just because I love hearing the different answers on this one. Favorite game of footy you have ever seen live on television, doesn't matter, at the park, on the telly. Where's your favorite game of footy you have ever seen?
Oh, favorite game. It's kind of, well, I mean, I talked about the finals. They were pretty good. I think recently, being at the Carlton game at the end of this year was probably one of the most elated I'd felt at a game for a long time. Given I guess just the sheer position that we were in, and for us to come back and win. I hadn't been at a game like that, a comeback victory like that for a long time. So I think sort of I remember still like not really comprehending what was happening in front of me when Cozzy kicks that goal and, and understanding that we were in, and the crowd just erupting. I think that was a really fun game. And one of the most, like, I'll never forget that. given that there was a lot on the line for us and for Carlton as well. Obviously, they had to win. They just had to win one of their last 5 games to make the finals, which they didn't. But a couple of players like Jaden Hunt really won us that game towards the end of a couple of big efforts from him and Jake Melksham as well too. But yeah, getting to that point and being in that position that we were in, where we didn't really deserve to win, that's certainly got to be one of the most memorable games of recent memory for sure.
Awesome. That's going to do it for my questions. But before we go, as I kind of mentioned earlier, you and Sima are both part of the Attention to Detail podcast. And like I said, I had the pleasure of sitting down and chatting with you guys, and I greatly appreciated that you had me on. So I want to let my audience know, just in case there's a D's fan that doesn't know about your podcast, tell them a little bit about your podcast, how you kind of do it, and where to access it.
So Attention to Detail. We've been running for what I think it might be year 4 now this year. Pretty much just me and Simo having a bit of banter, generally round by round sort of game reviews. Sometimes we have special guests, pop up, which has been nice. We just sort of run through things that we like, things that we didn't like. We do a play of the round each week, and then looking ahead to the following week. So it's a pretty lighthearted kind of D's Nuffy podcast where we give plenty of crap to each other, but just talking about the ins and outs of sort of each game. And then we're sort of lucky enough to have a few special guests pop on when we do. So you can find it on any of your favorite podcast channels, but it's Attention to Detail with a double E on the D. So apologies for the pun there, but I'm not really sorry for it. I'm pretty happy with it. But Spotify, Google, you can find us on any of those. So if you're a D's fan, or even if you're not a D's fan, then feel free to give it a listen for sure.
Awesome. Well, I had a blast coming on the episode, and like I said, if you ever need a Swans preview episode, let me reach out. Let me know. Would love to hop back on again. And again, I love these connections because you guys have a podcast. I have a podcast. I love interworking with each other. So I may reach back out to you guys for maybe a D's preview chat, maybe at another time. So, but I genuinely appreciate both you and Simo. Unfortunately, had to go. Both you guys hopping on because I love these chats. They're absolutely a lot of fun. So thank you, Tim, very, very much for hopping on the podcast today.
No worries, mate. No, it sounds good. Round 3 we play, so maybe we can sort something out. Preview for them. But no, thanks so much for having us. It's great to chat to you, and see you again.
Alrighty, and that's going to do it for today's episode. Again, keep track, ladies and gentlemen. We have more episodes coming out. Remember, Sandful, Waffle, and VFL clubs will also be on the docket this year during my off-season series. Keep an eye out, and we will be back very, very soon.